Hello, and welcome to HITC Sevens, the most popular YouTube channel among football-loving Mensa members in all the world. That is an entirely fictitious fact, but I reckon HITC 7 subscribers are the intellectual superiors to all other football-based YouTube channels. And that is why you are all connoisseurs when it comes to underrated seasons, and are no doubt on tenterhooks to hear of the 7 that I've come up with. Those of you who follow me on Twitter may recall this post, some of you may even have responded, and if you don't yet follow me on Twitter, I'm not quite sure what you're waiting for, but you're missing out on added world-class analysis on a routine basis, and the occasional screenshot from my family WhatsApp. The username is just at HITC Sevens, and it's the same on Instagram if you want a double dose of HITC Sevens superciliousness on social media. Today's video is one of those where there are 1,001 different candidates, and I had to whittle it down to 7 without any real scientific basis. It's difficult enough to assess which seasons are and aren't underrated, let alone which are the most underrated within that subsection. In the end, I've just gone with the 7 that interest me, all fairly recent because I know you don't like me going too far back, with an inevitable British slant. That is to say, individual seasons by individual players that are likely underrated from a regional perspective, rather than them all being UK-based seasons or anything like that. Hopefully that's all clear enough. The players and seasons are in no particular order, though I do believe that I've saved a couple of real gems until last. Here are 7 vastly underrated seasons from individual players, curated by yours truly for your viewing pleasure. Petr Cech, 2004-05. To be clear, I don't think that Petr Cech is an underrated goalkeeper. I think most people consider him to be the second or third best goalkeeper in the English game during the Premier League era, and the fourth or fifth best goalkeeper worldwide of his generation, behind the likes of Iker Casillas, Gianluigi Buffon and Manuel Neuer, provided you include them all in his generation. And I think that's about right. For all his greatness though, and Petr Cech did have a tremendous career, I still think we were robbed of a potential all-time great. Cech was only 24 years old when he fractured his skull in a clash with Stephen Hunt against Reading in the Premier League, which is very young for a goalkeeper. Though he was able to return within just 3 months of the setback, donning a scrum cap that he wore for the rest of his career, and he still went on to win 3 more Premier League Golden Glove awards and set the Premier League era record for clean sheets, he had still lost something. Cech was borderline unbeatable in the 2 seasons before that injury, despite being aged 22 to 23, and his debut campaign at Stamford Bridge was among the best that a goalkeeper has produced, in my lifetime at least. Chelsea's defensive strength and organisation meant the Czech international was rarely called upon, but when he was absolutely flawless. His positioning, reflexes and bravery were second to none, and it's little wonder the 24 clean sheets he kept and the 15 goals that Chelsea conceded that season are both records for the Premier League era. When people think of Cech, they think of the scrum cap, and though he was a brilliant goalkeeper with it, he was an even better one beforehand, and 04-05 is a prime example of that fact. Juan Riquelme, 2000 to 2001. As someone with a profound affection for Mavericks and flair players, it's little wonder that I've always been drawn to Juan Riquelme. The touch, technique and vision of Riquelme made him a joy to watch, even when he wasn't really at the races. A master of la pausa, as Argentines call it, that all too rare understanding of when to just hit the brakes and delay a pass for ultimate impact, and to wait for the perfect moment, in many respects, Riquelme was like Maradona had been reborn, just without that pace and explosivity that made Maradona an all-time great, and Riquelme more of a cult hero. Maradona and Riquelme very briefly actually played alongside each other at Boca Juniors at opposite ends of their careers. In fact, in the final game of Diego Maradona's glittering career, he was substituted for Riquelme in the Super Clasico with Boca trailing 1-0. The youngster came on and created both goals as Boca won 2-1. There was a new star in town. Riquelme is best known in Europe for 3 fantastic seasons with Villarreal, which are themselves rather underrated. It is the 2000-01 season that earns him a spot in this 7, a season in which Riquelme was quite possibly the most gifted and devastating midfielder on the planet, and I'm including Zinedine Zidane in that discussion. This period of Riquelme's career is often defined by that great performance against Real Madrid in the Intercontinental Cup, and if you're unaware of the game that I'm talking about, you should check out the highlights reel once you've finished this video on YouTube. Riquelme made Claude Makelele look like Lee Catamol the morning after a particularly heavy night, but that performance is only so well known because of the setting and the opposition. Riquelme was actually turning in vintage performances of that calibre on a weekly basis at the time. Irritatingly, I can't seem to find any accurate assist statistics from this period, but perhaps that's for the best. From an era before stats were king, and people would sit back and enjoy the majesty of a player like Juan Riquelme, recognising that he was a special player without needing to know how many key chances he created or progressive forward transitions he made. Thomas Muller, 2019-20. The most recent inclusion in this 7, this one wasn't in my original 7 or even on my shortlist, but I thought subscriber Samarth from India made a great case for him on Twitter. Thomas Muller is a perennially underrated footballer who has rarely got the credit that he deserves, and, outside of Germany at least, he probably never will. However, I wasn't aware of the extent to which his performances last season had been overlooked. Having just slated the obsession with stats within modern day football coverage and of a certain type of football fan, I am naturally now going to use stats to prove how brilliant Thomas Muller was last season without a hint of irony. The German Space Invader scored 12 goals and made 23 assists in 43 appearances in the Bundesliga and in the Champions League, only 33 of which were actually starts. His 21 league assists set a Bundesliga record, and Muller routinely turned on the style for Bayern when it mattered most. It was, in my opinion, the best ever season from one of the best players of this generation. And yet, where was the recognition? Of course, the Ballon d'Or was cancelled in 2020, but FIFA's The Best Award wasn't. Muller wasn't even among the 11 players shortlisted. His Bayern teammate Thiago, who is undoubtedly a brilliant footballer, but made nowhere near the impact that Muller did as Bayern won a clean sweep last season, finished 8th. Even in the UEFA Midfielder of the Year award, which went to Kevin De Bruyne, probably ought to have gone to the German, and you all know my feelings on KDB, who was also outstanding in 2020, it must be said. But then again, this is nothing new. Muller is used to being snubbed, and I'm sure he can console himself with his countless Bundesliga titles, 2 Champions Leagues, and 1 World Cup. Ultimately, Muller's style doesn't catch eyes. He doesn't beat players or routinely rifle the ball into the back of the net from 30 yards out. In many respects, he's awkward, certainly not the most graceful, but he has the most important attribute that any player can have: a brilliant football brain. So I agree with Samarth, and Muller takes up a spot in this 7. Charles and Zogbia, 2010-11. Alright, laugh away. Yes, Charles and Zogbia is featured alongside the likes of Petr Cech and Juan Riquelme. And no, I'm not saying that he is in the same league as either of them in terms of talent. The point of this video is to discuss underrated seasons, and on that front, and Zogbia is up there with the best of them. Viewers and subscribers who have watched my video taking a look at Steve Bruce's best ever signings will have heard me talk about Charles and Zogbia's final season at Wigan Athletic already, but I'm afraid I'm going to do it in a little more depth now. At his best, and Zogbia was a complete livewire. Quick, inventive, and most importantly productive in the final third. I would go as far as to say there were times in which the former French international was borderline unplayable. Most of those occasions came in the 2010-11 season, in which Zogbia was only 23 years old. In the last of his 3 seasons at Wigan Athletic, Zogbia was a joy to watch, and without him, I've no doubt the Latics would have been relegated. Zogbia scored 9 goals and made 10 assists in 34 Premier League outings, but more than that, he provided the inspiration for Roberto Martinez's men on countless occasions. I'd liken him that season a little to Wilfried Zaha in, say, the 2018-19 campaign, but whilst almost everyone recognises that Zaha is a huge talent and that Palace would be screwed without him, I feel as though Zogbia's talents were never acknowledged in the same way. Sadly, he peaked at 23, and following a move to Aston Villa following that brilliant season, his career pretty much fell apart. Aged 34, he has been without a club since 2016, meaning he effectively retired before the age of 30. Michael Ballack, 2001-02. Any Germans watching this video will be thinking, what on earth are you on about? We know Thomas Muller was fantastic last season, and that Michael Ballack in 2001-02 is permanently etched in our national consciousness. And I don't doubt you. But outside of the country of poets, thinkers and bratwurst, I feel Michael Ballack's magnificence at the turn of the millennium may be all too often overlooked. Here in England, perhaps unsurprisingly, Ballack's legacy is largely coloured by his time at Chelsea, where I think it would be fair to say he was good, but not great. He spent 4 very good years at Stamford Bridge, but he was often overshadowed by Frank Lampard, and at times Deco as well. However, the Ballack of 5 or 10 years earlier, particularly during his final season at Bayer Leverkusen, was an altogether totally different animal. In the Bundesliga alone, he made 25 goal contributions in 29 appearances from midfield. In all competitions, Ballack scored 23 goals, a tremendous tally for a player who wasn't primarily there to score goals, and was at the heart of everything Leverkusen did. Like Zogbia, Ballack was just 23 at the time, but you could certainly make a compelling case for that being the season at which he peaked. As well as being one of the best individual seasons of my lifetime, if not beyond, it was also one of the most cursed. In true Leverkusen style, the Germans managed to throw away their lead at the top of the Bundesliga table, as well as losing the DFB-Pokal and Champions League finals. Ballack bounced back from that disappointment to spearhead Germany's charge to the World Cup final in South Korea and Japan, only to lose his third final in as many months on the biggest stage of them all. Despite all those disappointments, Ballack ought to have come at least second in Ballon d'Or voting, yet he finished 5th. Underrated then, and underrated now. Romario, 2000. Outside of South America, I think a good case can be made for Romario's 2000 season being the most underrated of any top-class player in the modern era. And as I said earlier on, I don't want to go too far back because I know some of you get a bit sick of me doing that. The fact that Romario spent less than 8 years playing in Europe and less than 3 in one of Europe's modern-day Big 5 leagues means that he is perennially underrated, particularly by those who never saw him at the 1994 World Cup. The reality is that whether he was lighting up the Camp Nou or banging them in back home in Brazil, Romario was always the star of the show and the best player on the pitch, even at the age of 39. A reminder on that point that a 39-year-old Romario scored 30 goals in a season and was the Campeonato Brasileiro Serie A top scorer, but that isn't the season that earns him a spot in this 7. No, that would be the 2000 season, when Romario was still full of youthful zeal, aged only 34. Following 3 fantastic seasons with Flamengo, Romario returned to his boyhood club, Vasco da Gama. Flamengo may have hoped his best days were behind him at 34, but they would be proved sorely wrong. In an unlikely strike partnership with longtime enemy Edmundo, Romario scored 66 goals in 71 games. Vasco's archives have Romario's record that season as 72 goals and 13 assists from 73 appearances. A solid case could be made for Vasco having been the best team in the world and Romario the best player in the world at the turn of the millennium. Antonio Cassano, 2008-09. Antonio Cassano is a madman. We all know this. If you watched my video taking a look at 7 forwards who scored fewer goals than Sergio Ramos, you'll also be aware that A, he wasn't the most prolific, and B, he went through Nutella like it was water whilst playing for Real Madrid. Though he was ill-disciplined, unpredictable, and oftentimes unfit, Cassano was also one of the most gifted players to have played the game during my lifetime. Cassano's peak is widely regarded as having been in his early years, most notably when he formed an excellent understanding with Francesco Totti at Roma. His time in the Italian capital was followed by an ill-fated move to Real Madrid, where he swiftly fell out with head coach Fabio Capello. However, it was for a post-Madrid season that Cassano earns a spot in this 7, namely his first full season after joining Sampdoria on a permanent basis. The Italian had impressed on loan in Genoa, hence why they signed him on a permanent, but his first season contracted to the club was pretty special. Sampdoria were pretty much a one-man team with Cassano, but just as he had struggled in the bright lights of the Bernabeu, he seemed to flourish as the big fish in a considerably smaller pond. Having looked like relegation candidates in the early part of the season, Cassano single-handedly dragged Sampdoria to a mid-table finish. He bagged a hugely impressive 15 goals and 18 assists in 45 outings, making it statistically the best season of his career. But beyond the stats, the style and swagger was back. Cassano was an entertainer who humiliated opponents and delighted spectators, and he looked to be enjoying his football in 08-09. He should have been nominated for the Ballon d'Or, but Sampdoria weren't at either the Champions League or the Europa League, so he wasn't. That's it for today's video, but I thank you all as ever for watching. Please do hit that like button if you enjoyed today's video, let us know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Twitter or Instagram via the username at HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.